Now, if I could please call on Daniel to make the case for the opposition.
Thank you very much, and good evening everybody, and thank you so much for coming tonight. It's great to come to Saffron Walden. Some of my colleagues in Cambridge said, what are you doing going to Saffron Walden? I said, well, first of all, I'm practising for when I have to go out and tackle really hostile pro-Brexit audiences, so that wasn't a very good start, really. But it's also wonderful to be doing a debate in a bookshop, and right in my sightline I see books by Tony Jutt, who was my Director of Studies at Cambridge at King's many years ago, Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time. I see Thomas Piketty. I suspect if there was a straw poll of the authors represented on these bookshelves, they may well come into the category of experts, and I suspect they might well have a view on this debate. Because I have to say, I think we are facing the biggest crisis in my lifetime for this country. I see absolutely nothing positive about the path we are set upon. We are going to disagree. We can disagree in friendly terms, but for me it is not a matter for debate. It is a matter actually of acute national crisis we're facing, and I think it's unfolding before our very eyes in the House of Commons week in, week out. We are getting on for nearly 2 years since that fateful day when too many of us took it for granted that people would be swayed by the evidence and the facts. And we are no clearer about where we're going next. And that's one of the key issues here. I certainly don't deny the result of the referendum. Clearly that was the result that we saw that day. The question is, were people aware of where we were going next? And that is actually the big question now. What is going to happen next? Because one option clearly is the one that John has outlined, possibly, that in just over a year's time we could leave the European Union without any kind of agreement. And the question is, what would that actually be like? And from what we're learning and hearing, it would be very serious indeed. I was a Shadow Transport Minister. I'm on the Transport Select Committee, so I talk to the transport organisations on a regular basis, and the motor industry are very clear. It's a very complicated global operation. It's an integrated market within Europe. The number of times that components go backwards and forwards is staggering. I think most of us had no idea about the complexities of these things. And they're pretty clear that just 1 minute extra at customs in and out has a major impact on their business. Now, it's possible over a number of years that they could resolve some of those issues, but by next March, it's absolutely not possible. So what would happen? And I have to say, I haven't seen anyone else talk about this really, but March the 29th is followed very quickly by April Fool's Day. And I do think that if we would crash out on April Fool's Day, effectively in 2019, we will begin to see the kind of consequences that most of us in our lifetime have not expected to see in a modern industrial country, because basically things will begin to stop. They'll start stopping at Dover. We're told that plans are afoot to build a giant new car park, Operation Stack. There will be customs posts erected, new systems put in place. I mean, I have to ask, at a time of acute financial stress for our country, would that be your first choice for spending money? It wouldn't be mine. But there is no way those systems are going to be in place by March 2019. So what will happen? Basically, we will have lorries queuing. They'll be queuing. And the idea that the French are going to make this easy for us, I mean, come on, national characteristics haven't gone away just because they're part of the European Union. There's not really a lot of sympathy elsewhere for the decision that we've made. We will have to face the consequences. So as the lorries start queuing up, I just ask you to think through what some of those consequences will be. Now, for the good people of Sunderland who chose to ignore the advice of the people who employed them and voted in their droves, and I don't deny it, voted in their droves for Brexit, they will find that the production lines will stop, so they'll be sent home. Of course, they won't be paid, and their mortgages, of course, continue to be charged. And I would suspect within a day or two, they'll be beginning to wonder what is going to happen. But it won't just be the motor industry, of course, that faces the problems, because, of course, our food chain is entirely dependent on food coming and going. So people in Saffron Walden will be trolling down to Tesco's and wondering why there isn't any food there. And I suspect they won't be very happy about that very, very quickly, probably within a few hours. Those of you who remember what happened when we had the fuel drivers strike a decade ago, it was staggering, I think, to most of us, just how quickly modern life suddenly isn't the way it seemed it was before. We are highly dependent on a highly integrated system. Now, actually, you can go through virtually every sector. I do a lot of work with the medicine sector, because we have huge numbers of research companies, life sciences companies in and around Cambridge. I had no idea about this before. I think I knew we had the European Medicines Agency in the UK. We've now lost it, of course. But I didn't understand how significant that was, because all the medicines we use, and sadly huge numbers of our people are taking medicines on a daily basis, they all have to be batch checked and tested, and guess what? That is done on a European-wide level. And sadly, some of these medicines actually are very time critical and dependent and have to be moved in and out quickly. So also in those lorries stuck at Dover will be the kind of medicines that people in Saffron Walden and Cambridge and everywhere else in the country depend upon. And I'm told that each month, and we have a big medicines manufacturer, NAP Pharmaceuticals in Cambridge. I visited again, most of us totally unaware of it, it's just off the A14. They're a huge manufacturer. Apparently 45 million medicine packets leave the UK to go to the European Union every month, and 37 million come the other way. But guess what? Now, it won't necessarily be the first day, but some of this really is just in time. Some of it, the following day, people will not be getting their medicines, and that will be happening all over the country. And then there's the third example I'm going to give very quickly, not because it's necessarily the most important, because there are many others, but because I've been working on it. I do a lot of work on data analytics and information technology, and guess what? When we send an email to each other, or we send a text, it doesn't just go from Saffron Walden to Cambridge, it flies all around the world. And we have agreements through the European Union on international data flows. Now, there are complex ways in which some of these can be resolved. The general view is the last time countries negotiated what is called an adequacy agreement, it took 7 years. Now, it's not 7 years till March 2019. So what would actually happen almost immediately is the transfer of data, which underpins a huge range of services in the city, financial services, a lot of our professional services, would suddenly have no legal basis upon which to transfer any information, possibly anywhere. It's not entirely clear, because not everyone is clear on where the data is coming and going. So it's quite possible that many of our systems would just stop. Again, just imagine for a moment, given how absolutely dependent we are these days upon our technological systems, how that would feel to many people. So I don't think that crashing out in March 2019 without a deal is a very good prospect for many of us. And I would just beg the question, what are we getting in exchange for this very, very real risk? That's before the economic consequences of the extra tariffs and so on that we would be facing at that point. And the argument is, as I hear it, is the people voted for it. That's about the only argument I can hear. But I don't think that people fully recognise these consequences. And I'm absolutely convinced that as these are becoming more and more apparent to people, that most people would not make that choice. And it's the job of responsible politicians to actually deal with the situation that we face. So I don't really care how this is stopped. I just think it's in our national interest to give people another chance to think again and say, is this really what you want? Because you can go it alone in the world. Of course you can. There are stunning examples. North Korea, Albania. They've really been great places where people have really wanted to live. I do not think that our country wants to go down that route. And that's before we come to what happens in Ireland. And this is so serious. I mean, for those of us of an age will know that this has been a conflict which has absolutely beset our country for so many years. It's not perfect now, for goodness sake, it really isn't. But to do anything to make that already fragile situation more dangerous seems to me to be totally irresponsible. So I see no case for crashing out. Now, in my near 10 minutes, I've not had time to make the case for a different kind of deal. It may be possible to negotiate something. It may be. It seems highly unlikely. You've got to ask yourselves, what are the incentives for other countries? I think the point that no deal's better than a bad deal, it's not exactly a very optimistic aspiration, is it? That it's a bad deal you're comparing it with. And I have to say, when I see David Davis and the kind of his responses this week before the Select Committee and last week when the Brexit Committee came to Cambridge, the question was asked at one point to, I have to say, a group of experts, people who run our major universities, AstraZeneca, what's the point in all this? There was a silence. They were all trying to be constructive and positive. There is no point in it. Friends, we're allowed to make mistakes. It's a democracy. People are allowed to think again. I think we should think again. And I think this is not a question of whether it's in our interest to come out without a deal. We should just not do it. Negotiate a better relationship with the European Union and stay in. Thank you.